Laugh at the cringe, learn from the crumble. This is Cringe and Crumble. Welcome to the podcast where honesty meets humor and the messy parts of life finally get their spotlight. I'm your host, Tranisha, and here we dive into dating, friendships, healing, and all the awkward in-betweens. Because here's the truth. Growth isn't always pretty, but it's always real. So let's get into it. Welcome back to Cringe and Crumble. I'm your host, Tranisha, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about a video I came across on TikTok. This is where this episode was actually born. I saw this video that was entitled, All the Opportunities My Partner Had to Propose. This woman is actually documenting her 9-year relationship in a carousel of photos. So in some of the photos, you see them at fancy restaurants, you see them on holiday, and then there's the pregnancy. So you have the baby moon, you've got the gender reveal, all the fun things when there's a pregnancy. And then there's the post-pregnancy. And in every single picture, you can feel it. This could have been the moment, but it never was. Her caption at the end of this post was, almost 9 years, I'm hanging on. And like, whoa, of course, the top comments that start trending is, what is the taxi cab theory? So this episode is basically born out of her comment section, as I mentioned, because the taxi cab theory didn't just come from TikTok. It originally came from Sex and the City. So in today's episode, we're actually going to go there. We're going to talk about what the taxi cab theory actually is, what that famous Sex and the City bathroom scene was, and how it shows up in real life, like the 9-year no-ring relationship. And then we're going to flip the script a little bit. We're going to be asking ourselves, is your taxi light really on? So let's start with the sorts. So we're in Sex in the City. The women are in the restroom getting ready as they always do. This is the classic girls' night out scene, and they're talking about men. And then Miranda drops the metaphor that basically becomes relationship gold. Men are like cabs, she said. When they're available, their light goes on. They wake up one day, decide to settle down, have babies, whatever, and they turn their light off. The next woman they pick up, boo. That's when they're marrying, and it's not fate, it's just dumb luck. But it's all about timing. You got to get them when their light's on. But as Miranda explains, that men can drive around for years, picking up women and not being truly available. Now, most men don't stay lit, she says, for long before they take the plunge. Most women, she says, have essentially been ready since birth. And just like that, a theory was born. The idea that men commit when their internal taxi lights turn on, and the next decent woman who gets in the cab is the one who gets the ring. Not necessarily the best match, not the person who poured their life into them, but the one who happened to be there when their timing finally lined up. So when you really sit with that, it does something to you, because a lot of us have lived some version of this story. You've dated someone, they've told you, I'm just not ready for anything serious right now. They're emotionally unavailable, they're bad at relationships, or they're just healing from their ex. I'm focusing on me era. And you're like I have been in most cases, okay, I'll be patient, I'll show you how safe I am. I'll make room for you. I'll love you well enough that you decide you're ready with me. But then you break up, which is the most devastating part. And you do this whole crying in the shower like we all do. We start stalking their social media, especially Instagram, to kind of see what they're doing. We go out to happy hour with our girlfriends, just going through the motions. But then 6 months later, they're in a committed relationship. And then 1 year later, they're engaged. And so your brain's like, oh, so you were ready, just not with me. And that's where the taxi theory hits like a gut punch at the same time, because on one hand, it's comforting. It wasn't that I wasn't enough. His light just wasn't on yet. But on the other hand, it's very infuriating, let's be honest, because I was the preseason before he made it to the championship game, which is not cool because you feel as though you've wasted your time. You can grieve the time and energy you invested and still accept that his time had nothing to do with your value. So let's separate the emotional sting from the actual lesson, because timing is real, but timing isn't the whole story. The taxicab theory is basically a timing theory dressed up as a metaphor. It's less about you and more about where they are in their life. And I think that's where we get tangled because a lot of women, myself included, I'm not going to lie, have been conditioned to treat relationships like a performance review. As a Virgo, this is what I always think. If I communicate well enough, if I support him hard enough, if I'm low maintenance enough, sexy enough, chill enough, all the enoughs in the world, then I'll earn the promotion from girlfriend, then fiance, then to wife. So when someone doesn't choose us, our first instinct is to audit ourselves. So you start asking yourself, what did I do wrong? Was I too much, not enough? Should I have been more patient, less emotional, more understanding? I just don't know. But the taxi theory comes in and says, baby, his light just wasn't on. You could have been Beyonce with a PhD, a therapist on a retainer with like 7-figure salary. He wasn't going to give you what you wanted. And there's freedom in that. But here's the nuance though. Timing can't be the only explanation we ever use because sometimes we weren't aligned. And sometimes we ignored those red flags. And we stayed in things that were clearly not it because we were hoping to change their mind. So think about it like this. Timing does matter, but self-honesty matters too. And if this still feels abstract, let me bring it out of the theory into a real story because I've been there when the lights have been off and I know exactly what it looks like up close because I've actually knew someone who lived the version of this. She was in an 11-year relationship, and I mean 11, like in human years, and she patiently waited for this proposal. She was in a relationship with her significant other, we would say, or her partner, but they never lived together, which was quite interesting. And instead, they each stayed with their respective families to save money for a house and their future. And that sounds responsible, right? We're being smart, we're saving, we're planning. But year after year, nothing moved. No engagement, no concrete timeline, just vibes and potential, like hard on the vibes and potential. And I remember telling her very plainly, like, girl, if this man really wanted to be with you, he would have moved this relationship along a long time ago. But I didn't say it out of cruelty, but out of love, because at some point, we got to think about this point. We're saving can turn into I'm stalling. And eventually, she hit her own breaking point, and she decided to break up with him, partially to see if he would wake up. Like maybe if I step away, he'll realize he's losing me and finally make a move. And she ended it, which was good for her. And what did he do? Absolutely nothing. There was no last minute proposal. There was no grand gesture. There was no, wait, don't go. I've got a ring. All that happily ever after Hallmark story. He just let her walk out the door. So she wound up quitting her job and she moved across the country and she started over, which was great for her. She's in a brand new city with a brand new life, fresh start. She eventually started a new relationship with a longtime guy friend, which is in its own separate episode because this is why folks say guys and girls can't be friends. But we'll park that for another day. Meanwhile, her ex, he moved on as well. And honestly, I think he had already started moving on inside the relationship. He was just kind of slowly waiting for the next best thing or the next best moment, or as I like to say, the next woman he'd feel ready for. She was just a placeholder, and he was driving around with the light off, letting her sit in the passenger seat thinking they were headed toward marriage. And now he's married with kids. His taxi light eventually turned on. It just didn't turn on for her. And that's the part that stings, right? Because from the outside, you want to say, so I gave you 11 years of my life, and it turns out I was just the warm up, and now you've moved on. But the taxi theory doesn't make that hurt less because it does give us language to what was really going on. His timing finally aligned, but not while she was still in the cab. The win in her story is she got out. She stopped hanging on to a man whose actions were telling her very clearly, my light is not on for you. And she chose herself, even before she knew what was on the other side of that decision. And that's the part we don't talk about enough because it's easy to clock someone else's readiness, but it's braver to get honest with ourselves. So now, here's why I want to flip it, because we love applying taxi theory to men. But let's talk about your ready light. Because some of us are out here saying we want a healthy love, a secure attachment. We want a man who's communicative, who's emotionally mature, and are ready for a relationship, but our own light is dim. We're still obsessing over chaos. We're still looking at those red flags. We still feel chemistry with people who confuse us than people who are kind to us. We're low-key bored by stability, but we also call it no spark. So let me ask you, are you actually ready for the kind of relationship you say you want? Or do you just like the idea of it? If your light isn't fully on, that's not a moral failure, but it just means you're still in motion and still healing, but still also getting honest with yourself. But it's worth naming because one of the worst feelings is judging somebody else's timing while secretly knowing, if the love I prayed for knocked on my door tomorrow, I don't actually know if I know what to do with it. So instead of letting that sit in the air, let's do what we always do on this podcast and turn the feelings into clarity. If you're listening at home, maybe pause this later and journal through these. So number one, who was my ex, my quote unquote taxi theory ex? This is the person whose timing didn't line up with what I wanted, and I made it mean something about my worth. Number two, what story did I tell myself about why it didn't work? Was it I wasn't enough, I was too much, or I should have waited longer? Think on that. Number three, what changes if I accept that it was timing and not worth? How does that soften the way I talk to myself? Number four, is my own quote unquote ready light actually on? Am I living like someone else? Am I living like someone who's ready for a healthy love, or someone who's still addicted to the chase, the drama, and the emotional red flags? And number five, what does the light on look like in my behavior? Maybe it's being honest sooner. Maybe it's not entertaining people who clearly don't want what I want. Or maybe it's allowing myself to be loved without sabotaging it. So take your time through those, like really take your time. And there's no prize for rushing your healing, but read through them. And if you take nothing else from these prompts, let it be this. The theory is useful, but it's not your truth unless it helps you choose yourself. So here's my final take on this. The taxi theory is a metaphor, not a law. Yes, timing plays a huge role in who people commit to. So yes, it does suck to watch someone else become the partner for someone else that they refuse to be for you. But also, you are not a rehearsal and you are not a free trial. You are just a full human being offering real love with real intentions. And their inability or unwillingness to meet you is information, not a verdict on your worth. So if you've ever watched that Sex and the City scene and felt that sting in your chest, I want you to hear this. You didn't miss any chance. Your life is not over because one taxi drove past you. There are other cars on the road, and there is also, and this is very important, the version of you who learns to drive her own life instead of just hoping someone will pick her up. So that's today's episode. So if this resonated with you, send it to a friend who's still replaying that relationship of a man whose light just wasn't on, because I'm sure she's still going through that I should have, could have, would have. And sometimes all we need is someone to say, it really wasn't you. So if you want to keep the conversation going, you always know where to find me. But until next time, may your standards stay high, your peace stay protected, and your taxi light always turn on for what's really for you. Laugh at the cringe, learn from the crumble. This is Cringe and Crumble. Until next time.